everyone. Welcome to Life Mastery TV, your source for inspiration, empowerment, and fulfillment. My name is David McLeod. I am your Life Mastery coach and author of the book, A Life to Die For. This is episode 177 entitled Nutritional Healing. And because we were going through so much technical stuff to get us started, I didn't even get a chance to really get to meet my new guest. But we're gonna pretend that we know each other really well. I mean, after all, we're both Canadians, so how bad can it be?
Oh, I didn't know you're Canadian. Wow.
Yeah. So science in general and medicine in particular have made remarkable strides in the past 100 years. The number of diseases we have eliminated is staggering, and this is to be celebrated. But a side effect of this advancement is that we have collectively become dependent on medications and drugs for even the most minor of discomforts. And many people would classify this dependence as a form of addiction. I know that's a word that came up for me. Anyway, while the presence of symptoms can really help with a diagnosis, many doctors and healing practitioners these days tend to rely almost totally on symptoms and stop well short of examining root causes to try and deal with the real source of the ailment. Consequently, the treatment may alleviate the symptoms, but often does nothing to provide an actual cure. So we think it's time for a new pathway to healing. And given that most medicines and drugs of today are derived from treatments that can be tracked back to herbs and foods and all kinds of natural sources, it kind of makes sense for us to consider the foods we eat and to eat in a new way. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah.
So today's guest is an international author, keynote speaker, registered dietitian, and certified life coach. She has worked in all spectrums of healthcare, including acute, chronic, and preventive care. Her life journey called her to discover the real effect in holistically helping others find their optimal well-being. This led her to life coach certification, where she achieved the highest level of training as a life mastery consultant with the Brave Thinking Institute. I like that name, Brave Thinking Institute. She's been a dietitian for 30 years, and she believes she has one answer that can be a game changer for everyone. She's going to share some of her wisdom today on this subject. So please welcome Karie Cassell to today's show. Welcome, Karie. Thank you so much for patiently working through those issues and finally getting on screen.
Okay, if nothing else, I'm learning confidence of troubleshooting technology. None of that bio said anything about me being anything technology. So it's a learning.
Right, I know. And technology is wonderful. It's helpful. And it can also be a little bit daunting at times, especially when things don't work exactly as you expect them to.
Sure, right. Absolutely. Daunting's a good word, actually.
So, Karie, I know that, let me start by saying this. Almost every guest I've ever had on this show has had some kind of challenging life experience or life event that created within them a desire to do the kind of work that they're doing right now. And I'm sure that the truth, or there might be something similar about that for yourself. I'm wondering, would you be willing to share a little bit about your personal journey and how you got into this, the nutritional side of things, and why it's so important to you?
Well, it's multifaceted. It's almost as if I had two black belts on, one that had success and one that has failure. And so to your point, yeah, sometimes it was through tumultuous lessons, but other times it was something else. So at age 13, nonetheless, I'm reading the Nutritional Almanac book. And I thought that was normal. I didn't know it wasn't normal. How do you know? And others were reading Vogue magazine. And I started to think, okay, maybe there is something slightly different here. I had an intrigue about nutrients. So this is now a curiosity that's propelling the quest. But fast forward, although I was, very, very passionate, I loved being a dietitian, just loved every bit of it. And then I hit 40 and started to, through stresses and events of life, encounter, I had run marathons. I was at a peak fitness level. It was a wonderful little duet I had going on. until it wasn't.
Right.
So to your point, then I experienced the white picket fence wasn't up anymore, where these menus and these wonderful, wonderful ways of doing things work well. I experienced perimenopause at age 40. And so I didn't really feel like a billboard for messaging on health anymore because I was struggling. Meanwhile, my husband was struggling with gout and high blood pressure and cholesterol issues. Just because you're married to a dietitian does not mean that they listen. So in fact, there was sometimes the opposite. And so when he hit the floor one morning with his foot and had to crawl to the bathroom, crying. And I was looking at my own situation and looking at his, and I went, clearly there's something missing. Something is wrong here. And I was going to retire. That was going to be my way of dealing with things. That's it. I'm done with being a dietitian. I'm retiring and throwing in the towel. Because if I don't have impact, I'm not doing this. And then I just heard a whisper saying, you know, you're meant for more. Mm-hmm. And it led one thing to the next, which led to the life coaching. And it was there that I found the tools. As you were saying earlier, the root cause. You know, it's one thing, symptom after symptom after symptom. Here's your diet, here's your pill, here's your symptom, here's your diet, that's the curriculum I knew. Right. I then found a treasure trove that went to the root. And I now had these tools to kind of bridge. I had alternative medicine, I had traditional medicine. Still there was missing pieces, and that was the missing piece for me. So I was able to assist my husband, assist myself, and within a couple of years he's living his dream right now, to be honest. And he has no gout, and he's cholesterol free, so to speak, and blood pressure normal, and lost 40 pounds. And who knew? It took the life coach hat.
Yeah, that's great. So there's a couple of things I just wanted to get clarification on. You know, I'm pretty sure everybody's heard the word gout, but hardly anybody knows exactly what it is. Can you just explain what that is?
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, gout is like a form of arthritis. It's a very painful joint disease. Doesn't mean every joint. It can be in an elbow. It can be in usually toes for men. It can be fingers. That's usually another kind of arthritis, but nonetheless, it's the King's disease you may have heard before, way back in the day, is technically gout. It's eating rich foods and certain types of foods, and alcohol can be a culprit as well. And it's one thing to tell somebody, hey, don't do that, but you spoke of the word addiction earlier. All that weaves into it. And if you're not going to the thinking, you don't have the desire to give up those things that are your crutches. Right. And there we are with most of our problems in terms of our diet in the first place.
Right. Thank you for the explanation. Now, the other term that you use that I don't think I've heard this one before, perimenopause. I've never heard that. I've heard menopause. I know what that is, but what's perimenopause?
Yeah. So typically speaking, it's around age 50 that women will experience menopause. You have to have had no cycle for 1 year to be considered menopausal.
I see.
When you start hitting 40 and you're having the symptoms, that's not a usual pattern. They call it perimenopause. So
I see.
Okay. Early on stage menopause.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Hormonal,
right.
Hormonal upheaval.
So most of the people on this call today are women. So I assume they already knew what you were talking about. But for the men who watch these shows, I wanted to make sure we're all on the same page.
Thank you. No, that's good.
Yeah. So I'm glad to hear that the gout situation has resolved itself. I'm assuming that that a big part of your process in helping to relieve that gout had to do with nutrition, and that your dietitian or diet, I'm not sure if I got the right term here, your years as a dietitian helped to inform that process. But I assume that in addition, not only is nutrition important, but you got to kind of find a way of weaning yourself off the other medications as well, because they have such negative side effects. Is that something along the lines of your process?
Yeah, if we're using gout just as an example, it's funny. It actually twists in all areas in terms of alternative medicine, traditional medicine, and the psyche part of it. So we'll just use that example. While I knew to say to my husband, for instance, this means no beer, this means low amounts of meat. And I'm not saying meat free, just not, the size of your foot, maybe the size of your hand. It'd be like, come on, can we work towards this goal? And then there's just it's not like he was high on the list of other things. He's a corporate guy. He was in a lot of meetings and a lot of traveling. So one thing led to the next. But saying to him, hey, do you know that black cherry juice is actually something that's helpful? That's my alternative medicine hat speaking. And he would kind of, I don't, balk it a bit. He would prefer now to go to the doctor to get the medication.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective too, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? So in doing so, and you alluded to this in the beginning very, very, very well, it's his body, his choices. I only have so much influence. He goes to the doctor, gets the medication. Within a week or so, there's side effects. Always there's a side effect that goes with, well, I'll say a large percentage, if nothing else. And in his case anyway, this side effect was rash and these types of things. So it was sort of one thing leads to the next. So I said to him, there's another way. And why don't we just experiment versus it's a thou shall not system. Now we're playing with how it works up here. And being able to have black cherry juice as a natural remedy will only douse out a small fire if you keep on putting more, fuel on the fire. So he was still eating a particular way. Of course, that juice isn't going to work to the power we would want it to. So we had to come at it from all angles. A little bit of nibble down on the diet, a little bit of alternative. And we did aim at a point where the medication was not required. I'm not against medication for everyone. Type 1 diabetes, you need insulin. There is no alternative, period. Yeah. If you're having a heart attack, get to the hospital, not your naturopath. But there's a place for everything. And I don't think that we've in society explored enough of a bridge between them and making it an all-encompassing holistic, the word holistic and with a W as well, as in holistic.
Sure, yeah. Well, I think, you hit on something that I think is very important, and that is we can't ignore symptoms. I mean, the symptoms are the warning signs that something is not quite right. We have pain for a reason. Pain is supposed to be telling us, hey, maybe you should stop doing that. So, yeah, the symptoms are important, and sometimes we have to deal with the symptoms directly. I mean, if you got a cut on your arm, it's pretty obvious you got to, put pressure and put a bandage on it and all the rest of that. The question is, did that cut come from an accidental slice with a knife, or was there something else going on? Is there a lesion that causes that thing to open up in your arm? If that's the case, then you better start doing some root cause analysis and try and figure out what the real culprit is that's leading to that. So yeah, I think this is really, really important. The other thing you said about the side effects thing. Sometimes the side effects are worse than the effects. And
Yes.
And then of course, as soon as we have side effects, then we look for another medication to try and deal with that. Mm-hmm. And so we end up with this whole long chain of things, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. And I think for me personally, my recommendation is if you can find a way to get off all your medications, you will eventually work your way back to good health. But I'm not saying that you should just simply stop everything all at once. That would be kind of crazy. So
well, it's funny you're touching on so many things I want to say. So you just tell me to stop when you need me to. But what you're touching on is when I would have seen anyone in my past in terms of dietitian hat, I would have, hey, what are you eating? And done my assessment. Now I do a full assessment. I don't just look under the hood of the vehicle and check the dipstick. I am looking at all 4 tires and so forth. And that analogy brings me to the point where we are rooted in 4 areas of our life, like 4 tires on our vehicle. And if they're not inflated, one's driving flat, we are out of balance.
Right.
And those tires are your health, your relationships, your time and money, freedom, basically, and career or a vocation if you're not feeling purposeful, right? So one tire being flat, be it relationship or otherwise, we may be ignoring our relationship while we're heavy in our career. And I thought that worked. And I discovered that was my perimenopause. I was ignoring my relationship tire. And symptoms get your attention. Your symptoms are there to say, something's not right. And you have to go back to your thinking. And so in Stephen's case, my husband, when we did this full assessment, really what we came down to is he was suffocating inside and he wasn't really expanding his energy into his dream, which was to be a musician. Once we were able to take his corporate life and make it work with his music life, he started coming to me and saying, so to be on the stage, I would need to move around a lot and have more cardio. That's true, yes. Well, what would it take for me to have more of that? And I would say, well, we could start walking more. I've been saying this for how many years, but now it's clicking to the dream.
Right.
And he would say, well, and also I would want to wear certain outfits. And in order for me to do that, I might want to chisel down a bit. And so what do you suggest that I do to chisel down a bit? Well, maybe you cut back on the beer a bit, and if you, okay. And that's all it took. You see, he had to hook onto the dream. When you get to a certain age, as most of us are probably, I desire for a bikini body to go on vacation as a youth doesn't propel us the same when we're getting into our older years. And so for him as well, it took this other thing to ignite it enough to almost pull it around. Like in my book, I call it a tow truck. You need that tow truck to pull you along.
Well, speaking of your book, this is your new book, right? The Domino Diet. Just put it up to the camera so we can all see it, and we'll make sure we send people to. Can you pull back just a little bit so we can see the bottom part as well? There you go. So we see the Domino Diet. I can't read the small print, but it says by Karie Cassell. So congratulations! I'm glad you got that book out, and I know you're going to provide a link here a little bit later so people can get access to the Kindle version if they want. And I'll also post that on the recording on your permanent page for this.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this is awesome. So you've got this beautiful book. Now, I didn't notice, how thick is that? Is that like 300 pages or something?
Yeah. It's life coach meets dietitian meets alternative. I had a lot to say. Can you tell?
I mean, that book is big enough to knock over all the dominoes.
Well, you have to have a book that talks about calories and.
Right. Oh, and I see you've got pictures in there too.
It's there's dominoes because the book is developed into 6 sections and each domino represents a section in our life.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, that's great. So you've got all these beautiful analogies. You've got dominoes, you've got cars, you've got tow trucks, and do you build your own little car set on the floor and play with it, or what do you do?
Not at all.
No,
not at all. I don't even have a domino set, even though I was inspired by the title, and boy, I could talk about that too. But the subtitle is How to Heal You from the Inside Out.
Right. So just so you notice, Diane says, "I'm so glad I didn't miss this live session." So and she's been quite active there. She's made a few comments on there already. Thank you, Diane, for being an active participant. I always appreciate having you on the show. So yeah, you were talking about your husband connecting his dream to the diet, and I think that's a really, really important point to make. I've experienced the same thing in my own life. When it became important for me to be able to teach people about stuff like this, then I thought, man, I can't do this if I'm not walking the talk. I have to do my own work. I have to heal myself. I have to live a healthy lifestyle and be a model for other people. Now, I'm not saying I'm necessarily a perfect model. I still have things that I do that I probably shouldn't do. But I think all of us, when we have a purpose, when we feel like we're aligned with something that's important to us, then we're more likely to treat ourselves as the sovereign, magnificent beings that we really are. until we get to that place and start to see a purpose, maybe we don't see ourselves in that same way. And consequently, we say, oh, the doctor will fix it. I'll just go to the doctor, or, somebody else will fix it. I don't have to do the work. Somebody else can do the work for me,
Yeah, we see it as everything's out there.
Exactly.
But actually, it's in here.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
You're talking about the word desire, and if that desire is not dialing things up, water won't go to boil unless it goes up that extra degree so that it goes to the boil phase. Otherwise, it stays in the same phase. But
Right.
one little extra desire degree, and you can dial up and create a boil phase, right? Okay, here I am in another analogy, but it really does create desire is your key.
Yeah, that's a very important point. I did a podcast recently on my Life Mastery Wisdom podcast called Degrees of Desire. That was a few months ago, I guess. I can't remember how far back that was. But I'm talking about that exact same thing, and not only degrees, but qualities of desire. If you have a desire that's more like an addiction, that might not be serving you. But if you have a desire that is leading you in the direction of fulfilling a life mission, that is something that can really inspire you and move you forward.
Right. And what holds us back often is limited thinking, paradigms, old sabotage beliefs. And then we get distracted by a number on a scale instead. Oh, I'm not succeeding at life. Careful with that measuring tool. Not for the obvious. Most people know that it's not the greatest tool. It's like going to a boss every day saying, how did I do? Not so good. You're going to leave that job. But if you're using that as a measure of success, chances are something else is around the corner from that you're actually trying to seek. And we're being distracted by the vanity. So what you're talking about is degrees of desire. So if you stop and go, what am I really, really after? Because most people, when they achieve that number, aren't necessarily happy. Neither are millionaires. Neither are, there's something else. And what you're talking about is purpose.
Correct. Yeah. Life purpose is something that, we put lip service to it, but most people don't really do the work necessary to find out what that purpose is. And part of the problem is people are still struggling, trying to live a life according to someone else's directions rather than being who they really are, and that's not their fault necessarily. I mean, we're taught at a young age by our parents, by our teachers, by our ministers, how we're supposed to behave, what we're supposed to think, and how we're supposed to think, and what we're supposed to believe. We're taught these things from a very early age. And as a result, we end up losing the connection to the truth of who we are. So it's no wonder there are so many unhappy people in the world.
Yes. That was Stephen's case. His thinking, which, by the way, is the first domino in the domino diet, it's your thoughts. Well, I'm a corporate guy. I don't do you don't do the heart thing. You don't, follow a dream about music. You don't make money that way. There was all this old pattern of thinking coming from generations. And stopping and interrupting that pattern and saying, yes, it is possible. Actually, it's possible to do both. But what permission have you given yourself to do that and get rid of that corporate only thinking? And so you're touching on all of that. That's brilliant.
Right. I just want to say welcome to Linda. She says, good morning, beautiful beings. Great to be here. Always willing to learn as a nutritionist and alternative healing practitioner. Well, welcome, Linda. Thank you for being here. And feel free to make comments and share whatever it is you want to share in the chat. We'll do our best to respond to that. So, Karie, I wanted to ask you, one of the things that in your write-up when you were preparing for this, you talked about a sequence of events, I guess, that happen in your process. And I think it went thoughts, breath, hormones, feelings, actions, and results. Do you want to talk a little bit about that stream and how it works and why it's important?
Sure. So, by the way, that's the dominoes on here.
Oh, okay.
What first occurs, and I mean, this is simplifying, of course, a complex system that we all operate from. But generally speaking, thoughts will create how you breathe. So think about that for a moment. If you're thinking anxiously or you're arguing with somebody in the shower, you know, your mind is always thinking, you're never not thinking. You're going to be breathing a particular way. You don't even know that you're breathing a particular way, but you will. Right. You're calm walking, you're breathing a particular way. So your thoughts lead to how you breathe. It is your breathing that will trigger a cascade of hormones, be it good or otherwise. Mm-hmm. That will either help you in the fight flight mode or will help you in the relax mode or rest, digest, create mode. It is your hormones that actually produce your feelings, not the other way around. So your feelings are byproducts of your hormones and will be felt in the body. So think about that, because it's your thoughts, your breathing, your hormones, and then feelings. Your body is, you know, in the middle of the sequence of response.
Right. So just before you continue, I want a quick question. When you talk about feelings, I make the distinction in my work between emotions and sensations. So are you talking about one or the other, or somehow both, or tell me about that?
They're all intertwined, but let me elaborate by at least saying feelings is an example of cravings. Or I'll say this. Most people say, I can't help it. I just think about chocolate and I want it, or I felt depending on how you're interpreting your cravings, you're not going to get to the root of it. It starts with thought. So if you're saying my feelings dictated it, you're going to be circling around the mountain before you really get to the root. Because again, it starts with thoughts, breath, hormones, then feelings. So it's middle of the sequence. Because your feelings then dictate your actions, and your actions dictate your results.
That makes sense, yeah.
And whereas the curriculum I was taught was on the symptoms, the results. Here's your symptom, here's your pill. Here's your symptom, here's your diet.
Exactly.
We didn't talk about this other sequence, which is so important. And we have within us a switch, by the way we breathe, to switch on whichever hormonal system to flee from an animal, which is rare these days, or to be in the calm, create, digest phase. Think about digest under that phase versus running around the kitchen eating, or driving in traffic eating. Yeah. And a plethora of things are solved by just making that connection.
Right. So just a point, Diane says, what Katie just described would make an awesome or an amazing infographic. So there you go, a little bit of a suggestion for you. Create something and use your dominoes as part of the effect.
You bet. I have a little video that's in the works right now. I appreciate that.
Oh, that's great. But I wanted to just mention, we don't give thoughts the respect that they deserve, I don't think. While I believe it's true that most thoughts are just kind of random things that pop up into our heads, the ones that we focus our attention on are the ones that really move us in a particular direction, and they're the ones that can be quite creative. So, we can't just ignore thoughts. And after all, it's pretty hard because we have about 86,000 of them a day. They say there's different studies that I've seen, but basically anywhere between 1 and 5 thoughts every second is approximately what they tell us. So, 1 to 5 seconds, 1 thought every 1 to 5 seconds. I misrepresented. So that's a lot of thoughts. And the other thing that happens is that many of those thoughts, as we get older and older and older, many of those thoughts become repeated thoughts. They're not it's not like they're an original thought that pop into your head. So that by the time now this is going to be hard for people to believe, but the time you're about 40 years old, about 90% of your thoughts are repeats.
Yes.
And it gets worse from there. So, yeah. And when you take into account that most of those repeats are negative, they have a counterproductive effect. You can see why it's important to really start thinking positively as much as you can.
Well, and think about the fact that we have more and more chronic disease. Chronic disease is different than acute, obviously, right? Chronic is a continual. Right. Acute is deal with it now and then. And so think about chronic thinking leading to chronic disease. Would there not be a connection, of course, right? Yeah. And you're never not thinking. You're able to hopefully catch your thoughts. And who hasn't thought, oh my God, I just had a whole argument in my mind
You're
That's
right,
it.
exactly.
Can take
Yeah.
place. But the universe reads not your intention so much as it reads your attention, as you alluded to. So you can set the intention of the day, I'm going to have a great day, but if you're not attentive to that, then you are creating results not necessarily under your intention, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no,
So
it
you
makes perfect sense to me.
What I do, and this is led by life coaching sort of tools, is every time I touch a door handle, my drawer handle right now here at my desk, my door behind me, ask how you handle your thoughts. How am I handling my thoughts? How am I handling? Because you'll be surprised.
Great idea. That's
You'll be
brilliant.
surprised. Little things to say, yeah, actually, my train of thoughts has been running down the wrong tracks here. Switch, breathe. And if you breathe through your nose and out through your mouth like you're blowing through a straw, your brain, after a couple times, your brain picks up the signal. Oh, it's okay now? You're calm? Because there's never a scenario that you're breathing through a straw and running from a mammoth or a bear.
Right. Exactly.
And these are old DNA systems that we've been built with that we needed once upon a time, but it's getting a little archaic. We don't need it like we used to.
I don't know why, but I just had an image of Jeff Goldblum with a straw in his mouth running from the Tyrannosaurus Rex. That's pretty funny. Yeah, I love the door handle idea. That's really brilliant. I hadn't thought about that, but it's so easy to make a simple little anchor like that. Something that as soon as I touch that thing, if I tell myself, every time I touch a door handle, I am going to reflect on how I'm thinking and how I'm breathing.
Right.
What a thought.
Your subconscious brain is the one that's doing the repeat patterns, and you can train your subconscious mind to become a habit. Obviously, you brush your teeth without thinking about it anymore. You drive without thinking about it anymore. And it's that conscious thought of, I'm going to touch the door handle and ask that question. Eventually, the subconscious will pick up and begin to repattern thoughts, because you can set a repattern. Hey, I've been thinking this way. Insert a new thought. There's one thing to recognize that insert a new thought is the game changer for sure.
Well, you've given me a whole new perspective on doorknobs. I'll say that.
Good.
Yeah. So, because I think it's a great idea. Let's face it, you don't touch a doorknob all that often throughout your day, unless you're in some kind of an exercise process or something. But every day you will touch at least one doorknob, unless you are locked in a room and not doing anything.
Faucet handles, toilet handles, every handle. How am I handling my thoughts?
Okay, so it's not even a doorknob, it's a handle. I like that even better.
Yeah.
Because now I can say, how am I handling my life?
Sure. Well, that's what it ends up anyway.
Right. So another thing that you mentioned in your write-up was talking about body renewal taking place every 120 days. So let's talk a little bit more about that, because that's an important feature too, I think.
Oh, I absolutely love the science behind this. So, I have that science background that makes me so appreciate the medical end of it. And when I pull things full circle, I think for some reason, I don't know why people haven't been told this before, or I should say some. It was diabetes. I have a specialty in diabetes that taught me so much about reading red blood cells. And that's the case. As we are sitting here right now today, we have brand new blood cells. Every 120 days, you have a brand new batch. So because they last 4 months.
You mean your entire body replaces all red blood cells?
All red blood cells. And the way if you've gone to the lab, for instance, and of course that's how they analyze our health often, is take red blood cell sample. And if somebody has diabetes or high cholesterol or low iron, they'll be asked, come back in about 4 months. They don't say come back in a week. And there's other things that, yes, you could, but not for red blood cells. They need to have that span of time of 120 days, because otherwise they're picking up on old ones that have still sugar attached to them or cholesterol attached to them. So waiting 120 days means brand new red blood cells. Now, best news ever is studies show if you eat healthy fatty acids, for instance, the membranes of those cells are better. You talked about the word emotion. Emotions have a vibrational frequency. As soon as you have a thought, it goes to the corpus callosum between your left and right brain hemisphere, goes throughout the nervous system. All cells are involved. Your red blood cells talk to every red blood cell, and they talk to every organ. They run through the entire body. So by up-leveling them, by eating a certain way, by breathing a certain way, because by breathing into the rest, digest, create, you're absorbing better nutrients and more serotonin, more melatonin, more sleep, all recovery. How you surround yourself and your oxygen intake and so forth. So what I'm saying here is, by taking into account this lifestyle change on behalf of the red blood cells, you're up-leveling them to the point where in 120 days, they're new and better, and so will everything else be. You're internally healing from the inside out with this concept. Why I think that's important is being given a diagnosis, especially a chronic disease type diagnosis, shouldn't be looked at as, that's it now. It should be looked at as, what can I do to up-level, even from the inside out? And I think red blood cells are a great representation of how to do that.
All right. So now that you've asked us, what can we do? Why don't you tell us what we can do?
Okay. For instance, I'm a big pusher for micronutrients. A lot of people talk about macronutrients, carbohydrates, protein, and fat. And there's been a battle about every one of them. And unless you understand micronutrients, which are the vitamins and nutrients and antioxidants and omegas, you don't want to take any of the macros away, because the micros are in there. So that's long story short, but let me get there. I create often what's called the 120-day domino diet challenge. And in that, I'll suggest a minimum of 10 minutes of walking. And I say that because most of the subconscious brain will go, yeah, I could do 10 minutes. It'll argue with you, though, if you say half hour or an hour. Most people will do 10 minutes, but they'll end up doing more anyway. So it's kind of a trick.
Right.
Especially if you walk 10 minutes out the door, you got to walk back home. It's 20 minutes right there. Yeah. So 10 minutes a day of walking, because you're going to dial in oxygen, serotonin. I always suggest more water intake. And although the studies show 8 cups a day, like 8 cups as in this glass is more than 1 cup, the studies say that I suggest to start with 6, just to keep it simpler, therefore more manageable. And then I suggest 3 servings of vegetables a day. And people will argue with me on this, but I'll suggest 1 serving of fruit. And a serving, by the way, is a half cup. So a whole apple is actually probably 2 servings, depending on the size. And why I'm saying all this is all the vitamins and nutrients and macronutrients and micronutrients that are in there also up-leveling the blood cells. But I mean, of course, not just the blood cells, a plethora of other things. And it's simple enough to be something a person could weave into their life, and yet significant enough that the red blood cells will respond because of the antioxidants. And there's way more a person can do, but that's where I begin with individuals as a rule, including Stephen, my husband.
Yeah, it's interesting. I all these things that you're talking about, I've heard of pretty much all of them, and I'm actually doing most of them. I have a dog, so we're out, 2 hours a day walking, so it's three times a day we're out for a walk, and it's, that part is easy. And I enjoy being with him. It's awesome. We just go out and we walk around the neighborhood. It doesn't have to be exhaustive. It doesn't have to be tiring. I also do my own water. I've stopped drinking tap water. What I do now is I filter my own water. It goes through a three-step processes where the final step is actually it's being antioxidized. So I drink about 80 ounces of water a day. I was told that you take your weight in pounds, divide by 2, and that many ounces is how much water you should drink per person, because we're all different.
We are all different. Another I have another part of my training, which is with the International Olympic Committee for Sports Nutrition.
Oh, wow.
And all of these studies are done about hydration. Tons and tons, blood work, you name it. But the best tool is the color of urine. It's your own barometer, because we don't know how hot it is outside and where you're at, or if you're outside working, or if you're bundling up in skidoo suits and moving around it. All these dynamics, you have an individual barometer, and it's the color of urine. Clear, you're good. And dark, not so good. But aim for 6 anyway, I think, regardless, and then adjust.
By the way, you mentioned a Canadianism that most people wouldn't recognize, and that's the skidoo suits.
Yes,
some people might know what you're saying, but I certainly do.
Snowmobile suit, a snowsuit there, yeah.
Where do you live, by the way?
I'm in Alberta, northern Alberta.
I thought so. 780 area code. Yeah, yeah. I used to live in Edmonton.
Oh, currently?
No. I'm now living in Idaho, in Meridian. But
okay.
Yeah, so that's cool. So we're practically neighbors, and we didn't know it.
Yes. I'm in Grand Prairie, so you would know that.
Oh yeah. No, I know where that is. Yep. Anyway, that's great. So okay, so let's talk a little bit more now about this hormones first, feelings second thing. That's something that I never heard before, and so it's new to me. And is this something that's the same for men and women? Are there variations? What's really important here?
Yeah, we have 50 hormones roughly in our body, and they're all doing their job. The problem has been people have been placing blame on the hormones, me included. When I hit perimenopause, I was like, these hormones, not connecting it to, it's how you're thinking, Karie, that's the problem, because of how you breathe, as I mentioned. So we have a cascade that'll either be the serotonin, dopamine, there's so many, there's 50 odd some, or cortisol. When I just have to say that one, most people know cortisol is that hormone that is linked to heart disease risk, and it's a stress hormone. It also creates a bit of fat storing, and it definitely is in the opposite stream or cascade based on how you breathe. So again, it's not whether you're a man or a woman in that particular case. Those particular ones I just mentioned have nothing to do with gender in that case. But where we can get maybe more isolated, maybe this is stretching a bit, maybe read about it instead. But men think roughly around 7,000 words a day. Women, 20,000 words a day. Us ladies have brains that are more like a ball of wire, and we're multitaskers. Men are more isolated thinkers. They think this way. When we go back into our DNA, and this isn't for everyone, but it is a good majority, men would have been sitting in the bush waiting and hunting and not saying much, right? They're not taught, they're silent. Women are doing all the things back at the cave. So there is some DNA factor that's occurring, and why our brains are wired to read our breathing is to fight or flight. And so men are also a little triggered differently and resolve differently. So for some men, they're looking for dopamine. They watch action movies, maybe. They watch sports more so because they're looking for that hit. Women are looking for the serotonin and oxytocin. And serotonin, you will get some of that from eating chocolate, for instance. So there are some individualities from the hormones. And I like going to the root of that. And I'll just kind of, maybe I'm making it more complex right now, but I like going to the root of it to say, you know what, it's not all our fault.
Right.
We've been evolving for, years and centuries, and it's only in this last few decades that we're understanding the subconscious mind and conscious mind. And rather than placing a lot of blame, I think go within and go, there's some DNA that I didn't even know, and it's just there for years. How can awareness of 2 decades counteract that right away?
Right. Well, it's interesting that you bring that up. I mean, we have people in the wellness universe who are, experts on this thing called the Akashic records, and also people who do ancestral relationship studies and stuff. And they talk about pretty much the same thing that you're talking about. It's not from the same scientific perspective, I don't think. It's more kind of spiritual in nature. But you've actually, it sounds like, found a link between the DNA and ancestry and how we show up today.
Yes. And the spirituality compassion to that is give ourselves a little poetic license as we're evolving. And so the spiritual aspect is in there. And in fact, to the point where if you're not living that purpose, if you're not this call, like mine obviously was nutrition. I was reading Nutritional Almanac magazine, normal. Mm-hmm. But if I wasn't listening along the journey to make these adjustments, bring in the life coach hat, I would have retired, and maybe it would have morphed into more symptoms because I wasn't living my full purpose. So yes, it's part of your DNA in the past, but it's also listening with an ear to the future while being centered. And the best way to do that, just because you mentioned the word spirituality, is being present, because there is only that pure thinking that creates these ideas, and pure thinking that you get the, oh, right, if I do this and it feels this particular emotion, you're now on the right path. You'll get this from being present. When you're thinking in the future an awful lot, it's usually producing anxiety thinking. When you're thinking in the past an awful lot, you're producing more of a depression type thinking. So if you're prone to either one of those, good news, you can say, I'm needing to repattern this thinking in the future or the past.
Right.
Might be exploring forgiveness.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that that you talk about the different modes of thinking, thinking about the future, thinking about the past, dwelling on the past. These are attributes that I teach that are related to the ego mind. The ego mind loves looking back at the past and saying how you made all these mistakes and stuff. And so as you go looking in the future, you're probably going to do the same thing all over again because, you're really that dumb. That's what the ego mind wants to say. And the thing is, if all we do is pause and come into this present moment, all of that stuff goes away and calmness can ensue. And that's the whole point of meditation, is to come into the present moment, really. And the more time you can spend there, the more time you spend in a stress-free environment, and therefore produce greater health for your body. Right,
because you've tapped into the calm, which is the right hormone chemistry, and that's so on. So it's the sequence I've been talking about.
It's all tied together. There's no way to separate it all. I mean, I have a firm belief that we are all one, not just in some woo-woo esoteric way, but in actual energetic way. We're all connected, and in physics and in energy, consciousness. So we need to honor that and recognize the connection that we have, because it's important to all of the things that we do, including our health, our well-being in our physical bodies and so forth.
Yes. There's a portion in the book that gets into what you're alluding to as well, is emotional frequency. Mm-hmm. So Course in Miracles, if you're familiar with, says there's only two primary emotions. It's either fear or love.
Right.
And what is discussed, frustration and all these things are technically fear as a rule. And what we're trying to get to is love. And there's an emotional scale and frequency, shame and guilt being at the lowest, enlightenment being at the top. Maybe you've seen these with Dr. Joe Dispenza and Dr. Hodkins. And when you're living under guilt and shame, you're under the lowest emotional frequency. Right. Desire isn't even there yet. You have to climb upwards to get to desire. Right. It's actually measured in hertz. So shame is measured at 20 hertz, guilt at 30 hertz. Desire is somewhere around 100. Love is up at 500. Just even knowing your emotional pattern, and that again goes to your thinking. They're all interconnected in terms of how we are all on this planet. I don't care where you're from. If you have fear thinking or love thinking, it's the purpose that we're all trying to get to. I think that's why we're here on this planet, actually. And I think that we're all aiming towards having atonement, hopefully one day. as
Yeah,
connected.
or as Neil Donald Walsh would say, at one-ment.
Yeah, that's right. He does say that. That's good. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, the idea of being here to help elevate consciousness, I think that's really the way I see it. And I'm not sure, you mentioned one of those doctors. Were you talking about David R. Hawkins?
Yes.
Yeah, I've read a number of his books. I find his writing to be very, very interesting. And he refers to, I mean, I guess he's talking about levels of consciousness. And he's got a logarithmic scale. He believes that, moving one on the scale of his consciousness is
Yes.
a tenfold increase in consciousness.
Definitely.
Yeah, and you're right. Well, he uses the number 500 around for love as well, but he refers to it. He doesn't give it units. It's interesting that you talked about it being 500 hertz, so a frequency, which there's no reason why it wouldn't be, but David Hawkins talks about it a little differently. Yeah. But,
well, I used him and Dr. Joe Dispenza to quote in my book because they both ended up with same study similarities. And it
Right.
is, emotion is measured by a frequency called hertz, anything energy-wise in that sense. So it is really so interesting. And what I discovered for myself was when I was going through that perimenopause and so forth, what I didn't add is I had gone through a divorce, and the guilt, the shame, that's where I was residing, creating different thinking patterns, creating different hormonal patterns, hence throwing myself into menopause early, I feel.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, I think it doesn't really matter how enlightened you are. All of us can experience these negative emotions, negative feelings from time to time. I think what makes the difference between one person and the next is the ability to rebound from that and get back into your higher vibration. And that's ultimately what I think, well, that's certainly my goal, is to say, okay, I'm feeling depressed today, get it out of my system, and now just come back into my meanness, into my I-ness, because that's where I want to be. That's where I spend most of my time. That's where I like to be, and I feel most inspired and motivated when I'm in that place.
I think that if it was all so wonderful and comfortable, we wouldn't change, because comfort. Why would you change when there's comfort? You need a little discontent now and then to come along to shake things up. And when you enough times, you begin rising enough times, and you start saying, I guess maybe this is who I am. And I think we move away from imposter syndrome. That may be something you've addressed on these episodes as well, that we otherwise could reside in thinking, did I just get that by fluke? I hope nobody's looking, because I don't know, it's me. And that imposter syndrome would continue to rule our life if we didn't have a few tests that we rebound from, and resilience and so forth. Yeah.
Well, we're getting close to the end here, and I want to make sure that people get a chance to find out where your book is. Do you have a copy? You have that link? If you can just copy the link directly, the entire thing, including all the HTTPS stuff and everything, then you can just paste it right into the chat there, and people can go directly to your Amazon page to find that book.
So currently it's in pre-order on Kindle. The soft cover and hardcover. I mean, yes, I have some hardcover here, but they on Amazon will be August 31st when they're released. And so absolutely the Amazon link. Gosh, it hit number one, by the way. Okay. Where is
you just copy and paste it. And
you can take questions in the meantime if you'd like. I don't want people waiting on me.
Oh, you just raised your hand.
Whoops. My mouse is
okay. No problem.
Okay. Wow. I have to find that link. I wasn't thinking about promo of the book like you might be thinking, isn't that?
Well, it's going to be on my my website on your post page anyway.
Okay. So, in the meantime, it's on Amazon, dominodiet.com. Or Domino Diet, yeah. That'll definitely bring us. It hit number 1 on release, so it was a little higher up there in the rankings, if that helps. Yeah, and I can find it in the meantime. I did send it to you as well.
Yeah, I know. I got the email.
Okay.
So before I close out, is there anything else that you would like to say, just to, to share another final piece of wisdom with people about diet and health and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. I mean, throughout the book, I've emphasized an awful lot of banishing body shame, not having the old way of looking at diet. In my heart of hearts, I was hoping that, if something good could come out of COVID, for instance, it would be that, did we not assess a little bit on the vanity end of how we eat and how we stress eat? And it would have exposed some of that, I would have thought. So would we not come out of it saying, I need something new. It is time for something different. And my thoughts, and my hope is to see it as something different. No longer just looking at symptoms, going to a whole sequence of events. It might take a bit longer, like learning new software. But if you didn't learn new software, what would we be using today? Even though today we had technology issues. Maybe not the best analogy for today, but it's time for inserting new software. One time on our planet, the importance was strength. It started off with strength. And then it became strength didn't matter so much. It was riches. So are we not ready for yet another era? I'm hoping. And coming into our wholeness, coming into the at-one-ment. Yes. And so this book is about trying to transition our thinking, and that's why it's thick. So
yeah, the whole idea of at-one-ment is something I believe that we're all trying to do on one level or another, and that's really what my whole purpose is all about. My whole life mastery coaching and everything is all about that, trying to help people find that for themselves. And I always love having conversations with people like you who approach it from a different perspective than what I'm used to. So I don't know anything about diet except, just common sense stuff that my mom taught me,
Yeah, and there's
so it's good to have you, right. It's good to have someone like you come along to help me understand more about not just me, but everybody who watches this. So I'm really grateful that you're here, and I hope that your book is a huge success, that you're an international bestseller. That would be awesome.
Thank you.
And I know that some of the people who are watching today will head over and pick up a copy. And anybody who's watching the recording hopefully will pick up a copy for themselves too. So
excellent. I have the link here. It'll take me a moment to type it in, but if people need to
copy and paste it, you can just drop it into the chat. If you can copy and paste it,
it'll be.
If you don't worry about it. Yeah. Well, thank you again, Karie. It's just been a pleasure to get to know you a little bit and to share space with you on this program. And I want to thank all of you for watching today's program. And remember, you can catch recordings of this and every other episode I've ever done on my website at lifemasterytv.com, life-mastery-tv.com. I really hope you enjoyed today's presentation. To me, it was a very eye-opening and heart-opening presentation. I really enjoyed it. And in a few hours, you're going to get an email from the Learn It Live people. Please take a moment to respond to that survey and give us a review, because those reviews help us to share the words and to get more people coming out to watch. Also, I just want to remind everybody to remember to practice the daily life mastery mantra that goes like this. I'll just repeat it for you so you know. I gratefully forgive the imperfect being I have been in the past. I gratefully accept the magnificent being I am right now. I gratefully welcome the evolved being I am becoming in each new moment. So thank you again for being here. Until we meet again, my name is David McLeod. I am your Life Mastery Coach, wishing you love, light, and blessings on your continuing journey. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks for having me.